Okay.
What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you for tuning in on this Tuesday. We have with us Nancy Longo from Pierpoint Restaurant in Baltimore, Maryland. Thank you, Nancy, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's an honor. You're for sure somebody I've watched throughout my career. Definitely an icon in Baltimore for sure. And on this show, strangely enough, all roads seem to lead through the 2011 Kentucky Derby, where we first met, where you were representing, and we were cooking out from Denver as well.
We have a lot of mutual.
We've got a lot of guests on the show from that time. Ming Tsai's been on, Tori McPhail, Jennifer Newbold, so now yourself, and so I'm excited to talk with you a little bit. So we'll get your video back on as we always like to do. Kind of give us very quickly the minute and a half. Kind of what is Pierpoint Restaurant? Give people a little lay of the land.
Okay, so Pierpoint is in Fells Point, which is in the waterfront area. It's actually the oldest neighborhood in Baltimore. The oldest city house in Baltimore is right around the corner from us, and so we've been here for 31 years, just about. Believe it or not, we can make it to October with this COVID thing. And we started the restaurant with the thought of opening a restaurant to take old colonial Maryland recipes and modernize them. And so I had studied with a food historian and learned about a bunch of things. So all these interesting old quirky things about menus that were used at the White House and other state dinners. And so that was what the menu pretense was. But, you know, my family's Italian. I spent some time working at a Chinese restaurant. So all roads lead out to all kinds of other things that you've learned over the years, even a little bit of Italian when I had about 15 minutes fun working with Anthony Bourdain. So we've had some fun times over the years.
That's so great. I want to get into what colonial Maryland dishes are, but let's go back a little bit for you personally. Take us back. When did you first catch the hospitality bug? When did you first find your way into a restaurant?
So I was like 16 years old, and oddly enough, I was involved with the Girl Scouts, and the troop leader of our thing was running the camp here in Maryland, in Harford County, and said, you know, we want to go there for the summer and live at this campsite. And I thought, well, this would be fun. At the same time, my sister was in Europe, going to Cordon Bleu, and oddly enough, she came home and I started to work for her. But I think it's all to connect the dots. We had this grandmother who came here from Italy, and when I was 7 years old and she would have been 17, she made us cook with her. So we all learned to cook Italian food as a small child. And I'm going to tell you, it was all through instinctive hand and touch. She spoke no English whatsoever. So, I became very interested in food even at a young age. So I went to work for my sister. And that was it. That was all she wrote. So then I went to Baltimore Culinary and then moved on and worked pretty much all over the state of Maryland. I worked a little bit in New York and some time in Louisiana. And so a little here and there. A bunch of different
grandmothers
things.
Cooking with grandmothers comes up in the show a lot, I think. And I'm always fascinated with, you even as chefs, sometimes we can never cook a certain dish as good as our mother, as good as our grandmother. And I heard something great that I love is the secret recipe is in their hands. And you just mentioned that. It's like the touch, the feel for it.
I tell people it was funny because my grandmother had these tiny little hands. Now, mind you, this woman was, I'm going to say 4 feet tall, maybe 4 feet round. And she had the tiniest little hands. My hands are relatively small. Oftentimes in the summer, when I cooking camps for kids, the kids will put their hands up against mine and they'll be like, my hand's bigger than yours. But her hands were so tiny and they were almost green stained from olive oil. It was just really fascinating. But I remember that so distinctly as a kid. Great. It was like, whatever Renza said, you did, don't mess up, baby. But she would do the finger thing and you would be like, okay, we're not gonna do anything bad here.
The quiet intensity. So it's very true. Stained green from olive oil truly is in the hands. That is the secret recipe.
She'd scream at my dad like, he spoke Italian back to her, but he'd scream at her like, don't be bringing this stuff back. You knew when she was waving her finger, going back and forth, that meant no and nothing cheap. So I laugh and I tell people, I said, there's certain things that I never knew existed until I got older. That was, I didn't know people had flat pizzas. I didn't know Parmesan cheese came in a green container. I didn't know that people use olive oil that was watered down. I didn't understand any of those things because that wouldn't happen in my house. I ate Parmesan cheese in chopped off pieces and cubes. So I don't know. And she came and made pizza every Sunday. She brought her own pots and pans. Then, the typical Italian Sunday, you'd get 50 people show up. I laugh when I tell people these stories and they look at me and they go, "Are you sure you're Italian?" I said, "Everything I'm telling you is, but my mother's Scottish, but the rest of my family's all dark black hair." It's very funny. They used to tell me I was adopted when I was a kid, and I got older. I was like, "There's something wrong here."
Oh, family love.
Yeah, but that grandmother thing it's very real,
Yeah.
So
So you mentioned some of the places, the cities that you've worked and stuff. Pick a couple of highlights. I'm very interested, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about your team and 31-year legacy there. Unbelievable. That's like multiple lifetimes in a restaurant.
Yes,
Take us back. Some of the early mentors. Are there some things that you remember besides grandmother professionally that are instilled in you that you still kind of pass on to your team? Any early mentors, any of your trips throughout your career that you just like really remember and want to share with us?
So I told you that I was young in the grandmother thing. And then when I got older, so I went to work at the infamous Gianni's at Harbor Place. And anyone that has ever read Anthony Bourdain's book knows the code words that he used in the book. I laughed once one of my staff members was reading it. And I said, "Give me that book." And then I read them all the code words. I knew who everybody and everything was. But there was a chef there, and he's passed away since then, by the name of Richard Burns. And Richard was the chef when the restaurant opened, and Anthony took over when he left. Very, very famous guy, but he had a bunch of restaurants in New York, and I get my stuff all mixed up. At some point in time, I believe that he was at the Waldorf Astoria. So I wanted to learn from this guy because he had such a great reputation. So I wanted to learn the interesting finesse of Northern Italian cuisine, which there was none of that in my house. And I might add to make things even more interesting. So explain my family. So here's my sister was the chef. My other sister's macrobiotic. My brother's a vegetarian. My father has both celiac and Crohn's, and my mother has a headache. There were 4 different meals being made in our house. And luckily, a bunch of us were chefs. So we all had some form of fascination with food at our house, but it was always very interesting. So I didn't know anything about Northern Italian food. I thought I would go learn from him. And then when he left and Anthony came, so I worked with him for about 6 months. And I became very fascinated after that with Southern food. So, I always wanted to make Paul Prudhomme because I love all that food from Louisiana. And I ended up, there's always a bunch of little paths and things that happen in between, but I ended up teaching at the Baltimore Culinary School. And there was a young man by the name of Marty Cosgrove. Marty walked in. Marty is my dear friend. Marty's dad went to school at Paul, and he says, "I need somebody to go with me to New York and go to Chef Paul's new restaurant. It's opening." And I said, "Okay, sure. I would love to go," because I was thinking, great, I could finally meet him. And we went, and we were like seated at the table with Craig Claiborne and all that. It was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is the early 90s, and it's still really wild.
Yeah.
So, I always have a couple other interesting, fascinating stories. But anyway, I met Paul, and we brought him some crab cakes, and he says, "Those things were really good after I breaded them and deep fried them." I said to my friend, "Please tell me I didn't make a face to him, because I've always wanted to meet him. I adore him." He says, "No, he loved him." And then he came out of the kitchen, and he says, later, he says, "How would you like to come and teach the Cajuns about Maryland food?" So I went down there, and we had been friends ever since funeral when he passed, which was the wildest funeral I've ever seen in my lifetime. It was just very, very crazy. But we became fast friends, and Chef was awesome. But I learned a lot about Louisiana and Cajun food the proper way, I think. He was the master at that. So, but there were a few other crazy. During that younger years, I worked at a fish restaurant, and I learned how to cook 175 different kinds of fish, which is one of the reasons why if they open the restaurants here in Baltimore, I cannot open for a while. I have a lymphatic issue. I can't see it. There's a horrible scar there from having fish destroyed my immune system. So, so I had that little bit of that fun over the years. I can tell you that I've just done some other crazy things, but that Richard Burns stayed friends with me. And then I used to go to New York with him. He would consult at other restaurants. And so I had some fun times working at Mickey Mantle's once or twice. I worked at Sardi's, worked at a few other crazy places on Long Island. Other crazy road trip. One time I went to visit my uncle whose partner was Nancy Silverton's architect. And so we went to see the place before La Brea Bakery opened when it was Charlie Chaplin's studio. It was the coolest thing ever. And then we went to the friend's house to watch them. They were growing all the produce for Wolfgang Puck and stuff. And I met him later through Paul. And what a darling. I mean, so I've met a lot of fun people over the years. And
yeah, I mean, literally, I could just listen to you tell stories all day long for sure. I think
people tell me that you got some good stories.
I think it's great, and I'm not surprised that
some of them I'm afraid to tell on air.
I'm not surprised that the crab cakes were, because I know you've won every single award in Baltimore and Maryland for your crab cakes, every kind of crab cake. So that's not surprising to me.
So the crab cake thing brings that back full circle with the colonial thing. So we all know, if you've been a chef long enough, that we know everything in those days was smoked as a usage for a preservative, because once things are smoked, it like that crab meat, once it's smoked, it gets another 5 days of life before it can go bad, oddly enough. So I wanted to try that, and I thought, okay, well, we'll do this and we'll see what happens. And what I found is I thought the younger crowd would be the ones that wanted to eat it. It wasn't. It was the people that were older. And I said, I get it. You know why? This stuff, once it's cooked and put together, has a very distinctive quality to be more like a bourbon or a sherry kind of quality to it, not a smoked piece of fish or a smoked piece of meat. So it took off, and it's insane. And you know, Duff is my friend. Duff comes by one time, and he says, I have to put these crab cakes on that Best Thing Ever Ate show. So we did it, and then every time the phone rings, it's like, okay, guys, hold the door now, because we're gonna have to start making lots of crab cakes. But you know what? I said it's fine. If that's my legacy, I own it, and the recipe's out there on the internet. Anybody wants it, it's fine. Because I'm one of those people that believes that two things. One, that's your legacy. If you don't want to share a recipe, you're a jerk. Two, it's my job to feed everyone, which we'll talk about when we talk about what we've been up to, which is pretty cool.
Nancy, I could not agree more. Yes. I'm so fascinated in what's happening now. And I've been talking about for a while about direct to consumer. I've been like, restaurants can only make so much money inside their four walls. We're going to have to get creative on how we make money as a business. And like, I'm like your spice mixture or your pickled this, like you need to find ways to sell those. Have you thought about, are you thinking about those crab cakes making their way across the country?
So they do. Every time that show comes on, somebody says, well, I live in such and such place. We've shipped a bunch of them recently to Texas and Seattle. Sometimes we had one guy last week that drove all the way down from New York, upstate New York, not Manhattan, because he said, one, I need to get out of my house. Two, I need to go for a ride. And three, I saw some show and I need like a dozen of them. I got my cooler. I'm ready. So yes, they do go everywhere. And even a few charities. So one of our mutual friends, Debbie Cold, a few times I've done some stuff with Debbie, and I brought the crab cakes to all of my. I love Kansas City. I love bringing crab cakes, but I like Chicago too. So I'll go visit her there soon. But yeah, they're a thing. They just go everywhere, and I just think it's kind of cool to have that legacy thing that you can be remembered for at some point in time if you retire or whatever else you do. I mean, the only other legacy I have, but I didn't tell you the story, was many years ago when that arm thing happened. I went and testified in front of Congress on why we needed fish inspections, and that became the HACCP program in the United States, which is very, very cool. And then I went with John Keonis, and we bought rotten fish all over the country, and it's a fabulous video. I don't even know where anybody would find it, but we really, really delved into a lot of food safety issues, which is a very, very big thing for me. I mean, I've done a few charities here in Baltimore to raise money for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and other charities because I believe in it wholeheartedly. And because of what happened to me, I can't be around a lot of bad stuff. So it is what it is, and that's what I do. So I stay safe when I'm serving and selling, and that I feel the same way for all my customers. Matter of fact, right before you called, I just finished with the one that I have to worry about. My friendly family funeral director who I adore. I had to make him a bunch of fish and he had to go out the door. So, but he will only eat fish for me. My friends call me the fish bitch. So
Yes. So
that's a
perfect.
fun
So
nickname to have.
I'm glad you mentioned Debbie Gold because that's why we're talking. She
Yeah.
connected us, and so much of the show, 95% of the guests on this show are good people connecting good people. Like that's been really one of our mottos. And so specifically, she mentioned a lot of the charity work that you're doing. So I'm very fascinated, not just charity work, but also you're mentioning these different ways that you're thinking about safety, food safety,
Yes.
safety of your staff, guest safety in a very different way than you have for a long time. Now all restaurants are thinking very differently about that. So break that down for us a little bit. What's happening with you right
absolutely. now? So Baltimore right now is still on phase 2, which means you can sit them outside and eat them. They cannot come inside. I have one employee who's scared to be around it, and another employee is diabetic, and I worry for him. So we're a little family. We have a couple other employees who work part-time, and they'll be back because this is their second job. And so we're working on that. And we just basically we need to be careful. We need to be safe. And so we started doing other things. Matter of fact, the Sun paper quoted me in an article the other day, and I said, how in the hell can I open the door to let 4 people in? The restaurant, if nobody knows about this place, it has 36 seats and it's 13 feet wide and 20 feet long. I mean, we can't social distance with 4 people. It's insane. And I've lost all my children's cooking camps this summer, which I adore. These kids are inner city kids that we pay for them to be here and other kids whose parents can pay. But we love having them. So that's really making me sad. So one of the things that we are doing is making what we call meal boxes for the weekend for people who are inbound and don't want to be around it and are afraid to. So we make them food, and it's really taken off. It's pretty amazing what's happening with this box thing. And every week it's something different and fun. But what we have been doing for, I guess it's been 90 some days now, is we've been affiliated with Heart of the Park, which is Heart of the Park Garage. My friend Andrew Sachs owns, and he got with me immediately after the restaurants started shutting down. He said we really need to be able to feed restaurant employees, we feed people who lost their job, the homeless people. So we started doing this meal, and we will be by this Sunday at 20,000 meals that we have served. We have served 90% of them through the garage. 5% of them have been through hospitals that we donated meal. And so recently we became affiliated. Well, not affiliated. I've been friends with these folks for a while, but doing some stuff through the Italian Cultural Center, Be a Chef for a Day, which they teach children in the schools how to cook on a daily basis. So we're now shifting some of the food towards them because they have a greater need. They're doing a lot of more shut-ins. And then my kids who come from the St. Francis Neighborhood Center, we're doing some meals for those folks to grab and go. And one of the Latino churches down here, they asked us if they could get some food from us. So, once you start something good, they all want some of it. So we're fine with that. I need a purpose. When you're not doing all that food thing, we all know that folks in our business become very depressive because we're used to moving fast, doing, working, acting like, maniacs. And, but when you don't feel like you have any purpose, it's not fun. It just makes you sad. So, somebody else comes and wants some more food, but we also do. And then we've been doing some nurture meals, which is another thing we do out of the restaurant, where if someone, calls us, we send a meal to a hospice family in a hospice. And it's pretty amazing because back in March, my husband passed away and I had no one to send me a meal, but the guy across the hallway, turned out it was a wine salesman I knew, and his father passed away. And I thought, this is awful. I would love to send him a meal because I was in such a throes with what I was going on myself. So that's one of the things that we like to do too. And that's something that right now is a big need with people because they need to be able to get together and have somebody's grandmother's apple cake or something else to keep them together, because that's what we do with food is keep people together, make them happy, you know, give them a sense that they feel like happy from a meal that someone sent them because they cared enough to just send it. So that's, you know, that's one of the things that we've been doing. My friend said to me, I think that Nancy, you've never met a charity you didn't like. But in light of this, it's something to think about of all of us. And everybody should remember this is in our business, because we joke about it, but with the small margins and all those kinds of things. Right now, we're the ones that need the charity. And I always said, you know, once you own a restaurant, you need to understand something. We're always one step away from becoming the charity.
Yep.
And for some of us, we are, because we don't have the wherewithal to be in a big open outdoor space where we can, you know, put 150 people in a parking lot or something like that, or their staff is not available, or they have issues with children and stuff. So really, really need to think about all those things too. And that's just something that I always have been that way. And I think part of it is this little secret. I don't know about me, but some people may know. My dad was a boxer. And when I was a kid, we used to have all kinds of characters that would come in and out of the house, and we'd laugh. And like the neighbors were like, "Oh, was that Sugar Ray Leonard over there?" and stuff. So my dad would be involved in these things, and they would go to the inner city gyms and deal stuff with these kids. And they'd say, you know, let's not get in trouble. Let's find out what you need. And if you're angry, why don't you go punch the bag and let's talk. And so I learned really early on that it's not just about you. Life is much bigger than just about you. But I, you know, we all feel like we're feeding people with love, and that's what we do with food. So that's a good thing, you know.
Yeah, Nancy, what you're talking about right now is so important because we've all done charity events over the years, and we do the glitzy gala, and you know, we put a lot of butts in seats and all those things. And what you're talking about right now is the purest form of hospitality. You're just feeding and taking care of people. And to your point, a lot of it is also we realizing it's taking care of us. The ability for you and your team to be able to cook really helps your own mental health. And so
absolutely,
we're absolutely seeing that restaurants are like the pillars of their community in a way that we never have before. And the responsibility that puts on us, I think is important and fascinating. And to your point, you're taking that opportunity, running with it. And charity has a very different meaning to you now than it ever has before. So I want to think about that through the lens of your staff. You mentioned a few of them, a couple of them have potential issues that you're trying to work around. Talk about your team. And talk about how important they are in this moment.
The two people who have worked with me the 30 years, Brooke and Chris. Brooke is almost like a daughter to me.
Wow.
She manages everything and takes care of everything. And the minute we realized that my husband was going to end up in hospice, she said to me, "Get off the phone, go be with your stepkids, go do what you got to do, and don't call me until you get home. We know how this is going to end, and it's all good. And in the meantime, you just need to know that, as usual, I have everything taken care of." Chris, on the other hand, has been with me for 31 years. And Chris is a guy that's been with me, I mean, 16 years old, 17 years old. He's getting up there. And the thing is he's dyslexic. So we taught him how to cook from just watching. And he learned to make pastries from all the pastry people that have been in here. He preps stuff with us. He helps me manage a bunch of catering events. So I have another staff that we are their part-time job for a catering staff. And I'm really sad because I haven't seen it. We lost a whole bunch of weddings, obviously, this spring, and we'll see them again. But they are like my backbone. I make comments like, I need to make sure that everybody's taken care of. And I said to them, you know, no matter what, you're going to get paid. If we didn't get PPP money or we get whatever, we'll find it. And they've been here solidly through the whole thing. You know, it is utterly amazing. And that's when you realize that you are a family. And people just make jokes about, oh, hospitality, everybody's like a family. No, you really need to treat them like your family. In other words, if you wouldn't be mean to your own children or to your siblings or your parents, then you can't be to these folks too. You got to make sure that everybody's needs are taken care of, because if you don't, then they're going to go. And I think it's a testament to say that somebody's been working with you since the day you opened, and the other one went off to college and also, but she's still been in for over 20 some years, that they understand that I'm not going to leave them out in the cold. I would never do that. And so I had to make sure that whatever was happening first happened for them. And you know, people have thrown enormous amounts of cash and tips to them, and the rule is it's theirs. I'll figure myself out. You know, I can do whatever I got to do, but I wanted to make sure they were taken care of, because, you know, they're my family and I need them, and I need them and they love me back. I don't know if they need me, but if they told you that I did, then that's fabulous. They did that, then that's fabulous. Otherwise, I just I hope I have plenty more years to come with them, because they make me have a very easy life and a fun life daily. So it's important, especially in a tiny place. So
it's the most important. I think a lot of us are reflecting on that and recognizing the need for that interaction. And we're so go. You mentioned it earlier that you're just kind of, we're manic a lot, because a lot of times the manic keeps the depressive at bay. And so I think that's an important.
Well, I will tell you, for anyone that's been in here, I don't know if anybody's listening did quarantine time, but I spent the 14 days after I left the hospice place in my house for 14 days by myself. I don't ever want to do that ever again. Absolutely not having anyone to talk to and being home. And I'm not a binge watcher. I don't have Netflix. Matter of fact, I told him to cut the cable. I was just like, I can't even deal. I have got to get out of this house. I did spend a little time in the yard with a gardening, but no, I'm never doing that again. That's not going to happen. But I realized then that that's a lot of the reason why we like this business, because we like people. We like being around people. We like interacting with people. And I've had a few other friends of mine, like I said, had health issues. I've been feeding them for the last couple months, where I would make food for them once I got out of quarantine. And they can't be out of the house. I would just leave the food on the steps, and they just pick their box up from the steps. But it was great. It was fun. You know, I'm happy to have been able to do that too. I'm just a person that wants to make sure everybody's got food and they're happy. So and then we've had this, we're doing the to-go food and stuff, and we have like impromptu. They were like, "Oh, just make something," and I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of fun. There's no pressure. Anyway, it's all good." But that's what's going on here. So
Nancy, that's it. I mean, just what you said there at the end is a perfect way to end this, is that you just want to make sure people have food and are happy. And the more we stay tethered to that in our industry, the better off we're always going to be, no matter if it's during a pandemic or when we're at the normal flow of whatever kind of happens next in the industry. You know, like why we get out of bed in the morning and who it is we serve, like that is truly what matters. So I really appreciate it, Nancy. So great to reconnect with you, talking with you. Love hearing the stories for sure. Really, really appreciate it. And the best to you.
One day, well, I'll let you hear some other ones. There's some good ones, but it's all good. And I was happy to spend some time with you today talking. It's awesome, you know, thinking about what we're all doing.
I so appreciate it. All right, Nancy, you have a great day. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Nancy Longo is a legend for sure. So, I mean, that's it. Usually I try to recap and have some clever stuff to say. Just make sure that people have food and are happy. That's it. If it means your team internally, if it's your family at home, if it's the people walking through your doors, if it's people ordering online, that's it. And literally, I just love how many great people I get to talk to who say things that are so much the bedrock of why we started Best Served Podcast, to really value and focus on why and who before what and how, because we get so chummed up in what we do and how we do it and thinking that that's our competitive edge and that's what makes us who we are. But like why you get out of bed in the morning to do what you do, especially in this crazy ass industry, who it is you serve, like who's gotten you to this point, acknowledging the people that have been there for, holy shit, 31 years. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. You know, so I really want to make sure people know that there is an opportunity to have people be a part of your community for 31 years. You have to make the best damn crab cakes in the world, but you can do it. So, all right, Sophie, pop in here. Tell me what you thought. And I'm going to say again, I'll say this for the next episodes until people get used to Sophie Breaker, content manager. She's behind the scenes, popping up all the comments, capturing all those good quotes, and doing top 5 takeaways for us. So I always really like to have somebody else's perspective. And Sophie's been really great at capturing the essence of the conversations. So, I mean, Nancy Longo is an absolute legend. How cool.
She was so nice. She was such a kind human being. Like, what a magical person.
Yes.
Like she had crazy awesome stories. She knew Anthony Bourdain. She knew all these people. And then she was also talking about
in New York.
Oh my God. Yeah. And then she was also talking about nurture meals and all these 2,000 meals that she made for people in hospitals and meal boxes and and she testified before Congress and helped make HACCP. And that's like, she was talking about how her legacy was the crab cake recipe. And I was like, you have such an amazing legacy. You don't understand how amazing you are.
Yeah. And the crab cakes was super interesting to me. I absolutely loved hearing her talk about that because you and I have talked about it. I think it's so important that restaurants find ways to be more creative always, especially in this moment. So imagine, if you have crab cakes, a system, she's kind of doing it ad hoc, sending it to people here or there, or for events, or somebody who, used to be a regular and now lives in Texas, that kind of thing. I get that. But imagine if you were shipping that to little boutique shops all over the country. That is the way that I think restaurants are going to have a massive opportunity because people fall in love with your seasoning, your this, your that, your pickles. I think it's a huge, huge opportunity. So I'm glad that she's already doing a little bit of that. But man, I want her crab cakes in Denver, Colorado. Let's go. Who do I got to talk to about that? All right, another great episode, Sophie. Good takeaways. Anything else from this episode?
No, this person, D. Walsh, look, he went to high school with Nancy. That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Connecting people.
Be kind, be generous. To Jai Cook, love you too. All right. I really like this we got all these bells and whistles now.
Yeah.
We can throw stuff on a ticker. We can put comments up. We're getting grown up here. I got a microphone. So, all right, everybody. We appreciate you as always. We'll be back tomorrow, every day, 7 days a week. Even we're planning a little road trip with the fam. And we're pre-recording episodes to make sure that we come out with episodes on travel day because we will be here 7 days a week until I can't do it anymore. And then Sophie will take over or somebody else will be here because it really, really matters. So, all right, everyone, I appreciate you as always. Cheers.